Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guests. I got to tell you something, people. There's an outrage that happened in LA this past weekend, which is really cracking me up. I watched the Channel 5 news, and the news person, she wore a cocktail dress. Her name's Liberty Chen. And she started getting like hate mail. And I'm thinking, have you watched what other of these weather girls wear? They're like half naked. And this girl wore nothing revealing at all. And people are just bitching at her. And it just makes me laugh that people can just go after someone on Twitter and bitch when all she was doing was the weather. And the funny thing is, do we really watch the weather? Because we know it's almost always sunny. So it's like you sit there, you watch it, they keep saying it's going to be sunny. So anyway, that was griping me. And I'll tell you what's not griping me, my guest today, who he's been working constantly since 1990. Quite a career, I guess, is Abraham Ben-Ruby. How you doing, Abraham?
I'm good, Steve. Good morning. How are you?
Good. So I read that you went to Letterman's high school?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, David Letterman is from Indianapolis, Indiana. We both, not at the same time, but we both attended Broad Ripple High School.
Now you're tall. You're what, 6'7"?
6'7".
So now, how have you always been? I mean, I want to find out how you got in this career to acting, especially growing up in the Midwest, being that size. It seems like there'd be a good big sports pull for you.
Yeah, there was definitely the coaches all tried to get me for sure. Yeah, I've been 6'7" since like 8th grade.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And I actually started acting at the Indianapolis Civic Theater, taking classes when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and doing theater there. And then Broad Ripple High School actually had a pretty strong performing arts program, and so we did a lot of shows there and had a lot of drama classes. They tried to get me for football and basketball, and I did wind up going out for the football team one day, and it was a day where we were ramming into the sled, which is like a steel frame with a thin pad on it. And so I'm ramming my body into this basically metal wall with the coach yelling at me furiously, hit it harder. And I stood up, took the pads off, and walked away and never talked to any of the coaches again.
That's funny. Well, they must have been like, oh my God, the biggest kid, and he's like, screw you guys.
Yeah, I've had not much for that kind of physical violence.
What made you get into acting at such a young age, though? Were you funny? I mean, 8 is a young age, and you know, we do whatever when we're 5 or 6, but to get on and actually go and to get into theater, I mean, what made you gravitate towards that?
Well, I had grown up, pretending to be Spider-Man in my grandmother's basement, hanging from the pipes, and Bilbo Baggins and Captain Kirk. I was a big sci-fi comic book geek, and as a child, and that's kind of how I learned to read. And so I was always sort of pretending to be these fictional characters, and I played Santa Claus in the 3rd grade school play, and the woman who was the teacher / director of that told my mom I should go to the Civic Theater, and so I started taking classes there. And the first thing I ever learned, the first piece of text that I ever memorized, was the Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll. And I remember that just felt really heroic and strange, and that's how I got into it so young.
So you go through high school, you have a good acting program at your high school, you're learning your craft. When you graduate high school, what is your direction, and did you know that this is going to be your career?
No. I was a pretty poor student, I'm going to be honest. I didn't find my way to all the classes that were meant to be found. But after high school, I made an after-school special, basically, that was cast locally in Indianapolis called Private Victories, which, God forbid you look it up on the web, I'm sure it's out there somewhere. But it was like an anti-drug, PSA, basically. And then a film came from Hollywood to shoot in Indianapolis because we had an Olympic natatorium, which is a diving pool for platform diving. And they were watching Private Victories, looking to cast a young woman as the ingenue or something like that. And so they saw me, and there was a small part for the bad guy's henchman, And so I got to audition for that. It was like 3 lines or something.
And you got it. You were Rick and diving in.
Yeah, diving in, exactly right. And they wrote me into the rest of the movie, and the director of that, a guy named Strath Hamilton, was really supportive and recommended I come to Hollywood. He introduced me to his agents, and I've been with them my whole career.
Wow, so this one, I mean, it's just, you hear different stories, and that's one of those things where, yeah, you don't think you're going to be found in Indiana.
No, and I honestly never even imagined that it was possible. I mean, at that time there was a vast gulf between regular life and movie stars. So, yeah, it was beyond a dream. It wasn't even in my purview.
Well, when you moved out here, did you ever think that your height, and as we've seen, it hasn't because you've constantly worked, but did you think that your height may be a little bit of a obstacle? Just because, I mean, you're in the business, I interview people, we know there's a lot of actors who are like 5'7". You know what I mean? There's a lot of small guys. And for you being 6'7", it must intimidate the crap out of some of these actors. I mean, did you think this might be an obstacle, or were you just like, if I'm good, it won't make a difference?
I kind of never thought about it that way. I try not to overanalyze things like that. I just kind of go after whatever's happening, and I feel like that's been with me the whole time. So I wasn't really concerned about being tall. I will say that it was a distinct advantage in the early days because there weren't very many big guys, and I would see basically the same 10 or 12 guys at every audition. Some of them I got the job, and some of the other fellows got the job. So
you move out. I always ask my guests, when you first moved out, where did you first live in the Hollywood, LA area? Because it's changed so much. I mean, I remember I lived like 15 years ago. I lived in this studio right behind Sunset and Highland, and my rent was $375. And now that they probably haven't upgraded it in 15 years. It's probably like $1,500 now.
That's funny. I live almost right there right now. When I first moved out here, I lived in what they've come to call NoHo, which is North Hollywood.
I live in Burbank. I'm NoHo adjacent.
Yeah, NoHo adjacent. And man, it was ghetto. It was like there was nothing even remotely resembling art at that time. And now it's kind of a thriving arts district. But yeah, it was like fast food and porn shops, and maybe there was one crummy comedy club there. I think that's still there. They're probably not crummy anymore. But it's been really interesting to see all the advancements and the development come up in Los Angeles, kind of all over town, really.
Oh, yeah.
It's booming right now. There's so many skyscrapers under construction in Hollywood. It's bananas.
Oh, yeah. Well, I live in Burbank, and they're tearing down the big IKEA to make the country's biggest IKEA. And then they're going to put shops, and I'm like, we don't need a new IKEA. It's like I mean, it's just, I'm like, oh, well, we're going to put it right near the freeway, which is perfect for the traffic. But so
I wonder if they're having as much trouble putting together the new IKEA shop as we putting together their products.
Yeah, exactly. They run all those ratchet wrenches, and they're going, oh shit, what can we do?
Yeah, giant ratchet wrenches.
So you're out here, and you have that movie credit, but then you start you get on some sitcoms. I mean, how did that come? Because I know you were on Roseanne, and you were on Married with Children.
My agent's a fellow named Scott Manners. He's the head of the Beast there, and he took a liking to me, and so I was kind of thrown at every opportunity that there was, big guy or not. And actually, the very first thing I was cast on, Twitter is amazing because the internet's amazing. You can dig up anything, and then people can reach you. And so there was a show called Living Dolls, starring a very young and very beautiful Halle Berry. And that was the very first thing I was cast on here in Los Angeles. It was a sitcom. I'm sure you can dig that up out there somewhere.
Isn't it amazing? It's like you sit there. I mean, I'm looking through your resume. I'm like, okay, I gotta check this out because I do that a lot. Like, I'll find out if a guest has been on Miami Vice. And I love Miami Vice, and I'll sit there and I'll Google their episode, and you can find it. And you go to Netflix and you play it, and you go, hey, this is so easy now.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
So now you're working now. You're on Married with Children. You played a young John Goodman, which that must have been cool. I mean, because it looks like you were working with some heavy hitters. I mean, right off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of interesting because I've never been like starstruck. Really, that wasn't ever a part of it for me. I'm I'm more a fan of the material than I am of the performers, I guess, and I'm kind of more of a fan of the process than the end result. So it was just fun to play, and when you play with people that are on that level, in quotes, they're playing at the top of the game, and so that makes you up your game, and that's a real fun challenge to approach.
Now then, Parker Lewis comes about. Now,
Yep.
Fox was newer at the time.
Yeah.
I think you were one of the first shows, possibly.
Yeah, I think we were like in the second year ever of Fox Network.
So what's that like? Like when the audition, did they say, okay, this is for a regular? Did they tell you like, okay, if you get this, you're going to be as a regular, or was it you shot the pilot first, or how'd that whole develop?
They probably did, and I don't really think I understood what that meant at the time. But that was a really lengthy process. It was like 6 auditions over about 3 months before I got the part. I don't know why. You'd have to grill Clyde Phillips about that. But it was interesting because at the same time I was offered Parker Lewis finally after these multiple auditions, I was also had been auditioning for this film called Prayer of the Roller Boys. And if you want to look that one up, that is a very interesting post-apocalyptic inline skating movie.
I know the name. I didn't see it, but I know the name.
I had to decide. That was like a big phone call. The agent's like, all right, they're going to pay you this much money for the movie, and it's got these movie stars in it, and it's Corey Haim or something like that. Or you can do this TV show with these untested people. We don't know anything about them on this new network. We don't know if they're going to stay alive. And I was like, yeah, I'll do the TV show. So it was sort of an arbitrary, weird thing. But yeah, it's super exciting to be a part of that. That was basically my college, Parker Lewis Can't Lose. I learned about how the camera works and what's different between acting for the camera as opposed to being on stage.
It must have been, it must have been great for you because, as you said, it's a bunch of pretty much unknowns, and it's a new network, so you probably had more freedom to really learn stuff.
Totally, and I think it was that way for everybody across the board on that show. Our directors really got to play with the camera, and there was one very innovative fellow named Brian Spicer who has gone on to direct all kinds of television and films, and he invented a camera mount, and our director of photography was trying all kinds of different stuff. So it was a really very different from now fun time to be in the Hollywood world and have all those toys to play with.
What was it like for you, though? Because the show had a cult following. I used to watch it. It was a good show. It was a fun show. And it was different. It was sort of quirky. And back then, we weren't used to that. You know what I mean? And I liked it. Now, what was it for you, though? Because any shows who have, like, a following, there's certain people who watch that kind of show. There's certain people who enjoy that show. What's it like for you? Because now you must starting to get recognized. I mean, because because you're so big, and two, they're not going to confuse you with some other 6'7" guy. What is it like for being at a young age and really getting recognized? Does it throw off how you look at your acting and your craft and life? I mean, how does it affect you?
Well, it's interesting because I had always had that in my life. My father was a pretty famous local celebrity in Indianapolis. He had a really great band in his college years called Pure Funk, and then Roadmaster. And then he was on the radio. He was on WNAP in Indianapolis, and he had like the late night rock show where he would play like the songs that no one else could play, and he had like this kind of radio voice. And so I would wander through town and people would be like, hey, you're Smash's kid. So I always had that recognition in my life. So when it came from me being on television, I don't think it was as weird for me as it might have been for somebody who had not had that as a young person. I'll tell you what was weird, though, thinking back on it, is Parker Lewis was from 1990 to 1992, and it was sort of the very early nascent days of the internet, and there were these things called bulletin board systems, and the publicity department of Fox would print out on paper the discussions that people were having about the show and distribute those amongst the cast, which was really funny. I wonder if anybody kept those.
That is so funny how I remember that the bulletin boards. I remember, God, that's so funny because AOL used to have one. It was like a Letterman thing, and I would post jokes sometimes. And one time they picked one of mine for the top 10, and I was like, "Oh my God!" And I'm thinking, it's a Letterman AOL billboard room. It's crazy. So now, did you know when Parker Lewis went off the air? Did you guys see it coming?
Probably, yeah. I mean, the third season was so different from the first two. I think Fox was looking to replicate the success they'd had with Beverly Hills 90210, and so they sort of toned down the surrealism of Parker Lewis and tried to make us more of a teen romantic comedy kind of thing. And that was not what our audience was, and so I think people started dissipating.
Now, how does a young actor respond to that? I mean, is it something that you sit there because you must have gotten close with the crew and the everyone who works on the show? Was it something that was just a pain in the ass? I mean, when you're sitting there going, "Oh my God, this sucks." I mean, because you've had your career has gone pretty smooth. I mean, you think about it. You got cast in that movie. You come in here, you start getting parts. You get on a series, and then all of a sudden, seems like it was like your first obstacle, like roadblock, because it got canceled.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember there was a lot of sadness and like the unpacking of it all and the sort of, and I remember going back to the studio lot where we filmed and going on stage, and the whole high school had been taken out, and it was just this big empty stage, and that was actually the moment where I was like, wow, this is a weird actual ending to something. It was certainly sad. I feel like I had a pretty good run there right after Parker Lewis too, a couple of years, 90 to 94 or something like that. So it wasn't like I was instantly homeless.
Right.
Thank goodness. But it was weird. Every ending is a little bit difficult, and you move on. That's how you got to get through life.
Yeah, and you're constantly changing. I mean, I know it's weird. You think back when you were on Wings, you played Roy's gay son.
Yeah.
Which there wasn't a lot of. I mean, it wasn't a lot of gay roles back then. It's sort of like people probably look back. You didn't see a lot of roles. What was that like? I mean, that must have made you feel pretty good because you're pulling off playing this role that wasn't a big subject on TV back then.
Right. I don't know like where I am in the chronology of gay characters on TV, but it's an early one for sure. Interestingly enough, because I had grown up in the theater, I was sort of already used to having gay people around,
right.
And it was never anything weird to me, and so I had no issue with doing that part or anything. It's how different it was, how less tolerant of that people were at the time. So yeah, I mean, pretty cool. I still have a very big bear following. If you will.
I can see that.
Bear lovers, I guess. And a lady friend of mine keeps threatening to take me out to the Palm Springs Bear Festival.
Oh God,
which, might be an interesting.
you need to go, and you need to video that and make a documentary, dude. That's
not a bad idea.
You sit there, you do the histories of the bear, how it started out, and you're like this. You're like this icon. I mean, that would be the best. You got to do that. Just go once with a camera. Shit, put it on YouTube.
I just might do that actually. I'm writing that down.
Yeah, do it, man. That'd be great. I'd watch it.
Yeah.
Give me a part. I can be the guy who acts as a promoter. I'm telling you, we'll give you for this. I'll come in for this much money. He's the grand master of ceremonies.
Do the research on the history of the bear lovers, and we're in.
So you're working away. You're this actor. I want to talk later about the movie you directed. That's how we got in touch, because James Dumont. You're friends with James.
I am. I didn't direct anything, though. Oh, that'll be interesting to talk about.
Oh, I thought he said you directed it. It was a movie he posted.
No, I didn't direct it. We're both in that film.
Okay.
It's funny. James Dumont and I cross paths all the time. He's a face that I'm sure your listeners are aware of, and he's in damn near every movie ever made.
Oh, he's in everything. But I want to get to that. But I want to talk about ER. Now,
yeah.
Okay. So you're sitting there, you come off Parker Lewis Can't Lose. You go for this. Now, what was the buzz? Like, how did your agents, did they think ER would be, I mean, ER was huge. I mean, the numbers, it was sick. When you read for
Nobody
that?
had any idea.
Yeah, what did you think when they said, "Hey, it's a hospital show"? I mean, what did your agent tell you were going to read for?
Well, first of all, they booked it as a movie of the week. They used to make these 2-hour TV movies, movie of the week, and I remember John Levy, the casting director. I think there was like 180 roles to cast in what became the pilot. And I had read for China Beach a couple of times, which was the show that John Wells was the creator of early on. And so at some point, I think that may have been the first time I was ever offered a role straight up, which was very kind of John Levy and John Wells to do. But I didn't know that it was even intended to be a series when we shot the pilot. I thought it was going to be this movie of the week, and it was great fun. Everybody, all those guys were so cool, and I think maybe, I had known of of Anthony Edwards from his career, but the rest of them I didn't really know. Even George Clooney, I was not, I did not know, and so it was cool. It was just a bunch of actors doing a really well written piece of material, and we had a lot of fun. And again, that was an experience where the Steadicam was kind of a new thing for television at that time, and so that was a really amazing thing to witness, the work that went into doing those choreographed scenes.
Now you do it, and then when do you find out it's going to get picked up to series? And and when you find out, then you're a part of it?
I feel like maybe we shot it in like April of a year. I remember we were shooting when Kurt Cobain died, because I remember hearing that on the radio in my trailer. And so maybe April we were shooting, and then in August maybe I found out that it was so not that long. And so, in the grand scheme of things.
So you get it, and did you have any? I mean, it's funny because you think back. I mean, everybody watched that show. Like, I mean, the ratings were out the roof. I mean,
yeah.
It was sitting there where you like, okay, this is. I mean, when did it start getting hot? Like, when did you guys really start feeling the buzz and saying, okay, we're on something that's going to run for a long time?
Well, it's interesting actually. So I think we were filming maybe the 6th episode ever, and the show was about to air, and there was a lot of hype and there was a lot of promotion. And I remember saying to Clooney, this show's going to be #1, and he goes, "No, you're crazy. There's no way. It's medical dramas. Nobody watches. It'll do well, but it's not going to be #1." And we bet $5, and motherfucker still owes. Oh, can I say that?
That's all right. Yeah, it's fine. Clooney owes you $5.
Yeah.
Oh, that.
No, he's been very good to me. He owes me nothing. But and the first episode, #1, out of the gate, like something like 16 or 18 million viewers, which was unheard of at that time, is unheard of now. I mean, there are very few shows that get that kind of audience anymore because there's so much more competition for your eyeballs.
And the thing about ER, though, also was it wasn't just like that one time it got the numbers. It constantly drew.
Yeah, I mean, almost the entire 15-year run of the show, at least the first 5 years, it was #1 every time it aired. Even some reruns were like the highest rated program of the week, which is how they used to judge things.
Didn't Tarantino direct an episode?
He did, yeah. Yeah, he was cool. He was demonstrating to an actor, or he was trying to tell an actor how he wanted the scene, how he wanted the action of the scene to happen, and the actor wasn't quite getting it, I guess. And so Tarantino went out into the ambulance bay and came running in through the double doors and like slid on the floor like he was sliding into home base. And he was an interesting cat for sure.
Now, during that show, did you get to go to the Emmy Awards?
I never went to the Emmy Awards. I went to the SAG Awards. I think it was like the second year ever of the Screen Actors Guild Awards, which was cool for me because they were honoring Star Trek, and so I got to meet most of the Star Trek folk from Next Generation and the original series, which was amazing for me.
So how long you've always been a big sci-fi fan?
I have. I mean, I think the first book I remember reading was The Hobbit. My mom and I would read that in bed, and Spider-Man for sure, and Star Trek, and then Star Wars, and I've read most of the classic sci-fi and fantasy books, if you will, classic in quotes.
Now, you're also, now during this time when you're acting, were you doing any theater?
I wasn't. When I first came out here, theater in Los Angeles, I was completely unaware of it. I think the next time that I did a play would have been like maybe 98, 97 or 8. I went to South Carolina and did Of Mice and Men. And that was sort of a whim, if you will. The other agent, Tim Stone, who's a big theater agent in New York, he got me this gig doing Of Mice and Men, and it was really great, and it was nice to be back on stage, and it's such a different experience, especially with the group that you're with. It's like being a part of the circus, some films and television are like that, but it's just a different thing to be on stage and get that energy feedback.
Okay, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is rumor, because I do my research, and you see some stuff on Wikipedia, and you don't know if it's true, but were you a roadie for No Doubt?
Yeah. So, yes, Taj Johnson, who played Lemmer on Parker Lewis Can't Lose, was friends with all the kids from No Doubt. I'm not sure how that happened. But the very first sort of West Coast tour that they did, I think they played 6 or 7 shows, and Taj and I went with them in his Bronco with his girlfriend and another friend, and we drove up and down California with them for almost 2 weeks, hauling gear and laughing and having fun and seeing their shows and getting in the mosh pit. That was fun.
You must have scared the hell out of people in that damn mosh pit. They're probably
Sometimes they would try to get me. Those were different kids.
Now, how many seasons were you on ER?
So the show did 15 seasons. I was off and on for 12 of those. There were 3 that I didn't do any episodes. I think it's like 150 episodes that I did out of like 320 or something like that.
So how was it that you were off and on? Was it just that they didn't need your character? Or, I mean, how's that work for a recurring character? It must be weird that you're in the first one, then they don't. I mean, would you know your schedule, or would you know you weren't going to be on one season?
Well, what happened? What was really great about ER was they gave me the freedom to go do other jobs, and so when I would book a film, or I would book a spot on another show, or I would book a regular gig on another series, I got to go off and do it, and then was welcomed back to ER, which was really fantastic and rare and generous of them. And so there were a lot of projects in those years, that opened a lot of doors for me, being on ER. And I certainly wouldn't have the career that I've had without that experience. So it was honestly just their kindness in letting me go and do other stuff.
So you get to go and do other things, which is great. And then you got the series Men in Trees.
Yeah.
Now, how did that was a different role for you too? I mean, it was more of a lead role, right?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, it's sort of my first romantic role where I got to kiss girls on screen. Yeah, that was a pretty standard thing. I went and auditioned. It's funny. This is how the actor mind works sometimes. The night before, I was driving out to a concert, like out in Pomona or somewhere, and the agents called at like 7:30. And I'm on the road and I'm driving. They're like, "You have this huge series audition tomorrow, 9 a.m. in Santa Monica. You have to be there." And I was like, "Oh man, I'm not going to get to work on it. It's right at the crack of dawn. I have to drive to Santa Monica." I was really kind of grumpy about it. And so I didn't put in the work that is really required to get these jobs. And I remember pulling up in front of this casting office and just feeling completely unprepared. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to go in there and do what I do. And somehow, miraculously, I got that job. I felt like I was terrible, but it's interesting. Those are the jobs I mostly wind up getting, are the ones where I feel unprepared and not at the top of my game.
I always hear that. I always hear people say, they come out of the audition thinking they killed it, and they're waiting for the callback, and it never comes. Then they leave the audition and they go, God, I hope my agent doesn't hear about this, and then they book the part.
That's exactly right. It's so funny. It's such a weird... I don't know if any other career has that aspect.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you don't see salesmen go in and they give a shitty presentation that no one's buying. You know what I mean? You have to level it. So now when you get this show, you played a rich guy, right?
Yeah, he had invented Post-it notes or something like that, and yet decided to open a bar in Alaska. Um, Really fun though, fun show, and great people there. And I got to make out with some beautiful women, and I met some really Derek Richardson, who played sort of the puppy dog of that show, is a really fun guy, and yeah, it's good people.
What's it like when you're making out with someone on screen? I mean, it's so one of those things that you don't get to ask much, because I ask, because I have a lot of character actors on my show, and a lot of them have been killed 87 times. So I always ask them. Well, I want to talk about you getting killed, because I'm sure you've been killed. But I always want to ask about that. But you never ask about the making out. I mean, do you sit there? It's got to be awkward because you're working with that person still, and it's no chemistry. I mean, there's no relationship there. But what is it like? Was that the first time you actually had to kiss somebody?
There had probably been, I think, Kubiak kissed somebody on Parker Lewis, but Men in Trees was the first time that it was like I'm in bed with her, and yeah, it was odd for sure, because as you may or may not be aware, there were interesting behind the scenes happenings on that show amongst the cast, and so that's putting it delicately, and so there were jealousies happening amongst the partners of the actors involved in all of the characters of that show. I'm really circling around the bush here.
It's all right. It's
so
the drama.
Like my girlfriend at the time was like, I don't want you making out with these girls on camera, and she came in the trailer and confronted the actress, and the other actress was like, listen, honey, I don't want your man, I've got my own man. And so it was odd, man. It was definitely weird. But, at the end of the day, you just have to get on with it and do it.
Yeah. Now, what was it like working with Costner?
I love Costner. He's a real, he's an amazing director, actually. I got to work with him twice. I actually worked on The Postman and was cut out because the movie was really long. And I really loved that experience. And when he called me to say that he had to cut me out of the movie, I thought that was really very cool and generous of him and totally unnecessary. And he said to me, I'll find something else for you. And I was like, all right, cool. Thinking, that's Hollywood stuff. It may not happen. It probably won't happen. And then Open Range came, and I still had to audition, but he did cast me in that, and that's one of the great experiences of my life, sitting on that hill with Robert Duvall and Costner and Diego Luna.
Yeah, that must
dressed
be
up as a cowboy and pushing a wagon out of the mud.
That must be amazing, just because you're right. It's like Duvall and Costner. I mean, they're both legends. I mean, you think about Kevin Costner, and people give him shit for Waterworld, but I'm sorry, there hasn't been someone who plays a better sports figure, at least that I've seen. I mean, if you sit there and go, oh, Tin Cup or Field of Dreams or this, the guy's perfect at those roles, and Duvall is just such a legend. I mean, as an actor, you must sometimes be sitting there, especially if scenes like that, going, man, from all the way from Indiana to this.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, man. Those are the moments where the reality hits, and I'm like, how did this happen? I remember, Duvall, seeing him running lines. Like, he was just doing it the same way I do it, the same way any actor does it. You just run your lines and run your lines and run your lines. And then it'd be interesting to go back and look at the film and watch for this specifically. He would play each take 3 different ways. So there was like the happy boss, the grumpy boss, and the sort of inscrutable version. And then Costner would piece it together as he wanted. And that was a really interesting way of doing things, I thought, just giving 3 very different performances in each take across the scenes. No. So, and the legendary status is earned there, no question. He's one of the monsters of the business, of the art of acting, honestly. And Costner had so much on his plate and was still able to give a great performance in that film. And it's astonishing to me, the guys who can direct and produce and act and do it all. That is a lot of hat juggling.
Now, what happened to Men in Trees? Did it get some ratings or?
What happened to Men in Trees? Men in Trees did okay the first season. We were picked up for a second season, and then there was a writer's strike, and that sort of derailed a lot of television and a lot of films. I think that was 2007 or 8. And the business kind of shut down for 3 or 4 months, and so that was the demise of Men in Trees.
So how do you rebound from that? I mean, it's one of those things, once again, the show's doing okay. And then back then, shows that's had to do okay. Like, it's changed so much. And I think you can probably notice this too. You've been on some long-running shows, and now it's like a show gets like 3 weeks, and if they don't do anything, they're pulled.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's, it goes back to what we were saying about salesmen, right? It's like, it's kind of the same way. If you're selling real estate and you go, 3 months without making a sale, the boss might look at you and be like, "Hey, man, we can't use you anymore." And that's sort of where it's at. It's become, it's not called show play; it's called show business, and we have to remind ourselves of that a lot. Pretty interesting, though. How do you rebound is what you asked, and honestly, I don't think I have yet. I've definitely had a lot of great projects since then, but the business changed drastically after the writer's strike in terms of, oh gosh, if I'm just being honest, in terms of finances. Things don't pay the way they used to, and it's funny, we had Alan Alda was on ER for a good season, and I remember one of the things that somebody had asked him, "Why are you doing this?" And he said, "Listen, you can be famous and not be rich." Alan Alda,
right.
MASH, years, one of the biggest television shows ever. And, that's a guy saying that, pretty crazy.
Well, I've heard that everyone says, the business changes just for the fact that, I've had people who had been guest stars on the show, and now it used to be if you were a guest star, you made a nice little chunk of change.
Yep.
But now it's like they sit there and they go, okay, we're going to pay you the day rate, and they try to squeeze everything in one day. And I think it's going to hurt the business just for the fact that, you need good actors to have good product. I mean, I don't want to watch a TV show where the people suck. You know what I mean? And when you start, it's true. When they start cutting the budget, then you sit there and you go, okay, like I used to do stand-up comedy. And there was a club, this one guy, he was legendary in Philadelphia for underpaying everybody. And he'd be like, "Hey, Cooper, can you come out and headline this club?" I go, "What's it pay?" And he'd tell me, I go, "I can make that to open for another person." He'd said, "Oh, then we'll just use this guy." And I'm like, yeah, but when you're using this guy who's not ready, who will work for that, you're hurting the business. And I think that may start coming. I mean, Hollywood, it's weird. I mean, it's got to be something. They got to do something where you got to keep you actors getting paid well.
Well, the same 1,000 actors that get paid well are going to keep getting paid well. So there's a portion that's doing fine. And I think this is across the board, man. I don't think this is relegated just to Hollywood or acting. People, businesses are not in it for the people; they're in it for the profit, and I understand that. And like you said, you don't want to watch acting that sucks, but the audience is changing. I had this discussion with a friend of mine. His kid would never put on the TV, but he'll watch YouTube videos all day long on his phone. So there is still an audience for the magic of the cinema and TV that people of you and I's age appreciate. But it's dwindling.
Well, I want to talk about some of your later work in the movie, and I want to talk about the bridge.
That's depressing. Okay, cool.
Now I want to talk about the bridge, because that's a great show, and you got pretty shot up.
One of many deaths.
What?
Yeah, I loved working on The Bridge, man. That was a really great show with a really great team of people behind it, who I'm still friends with. And if I'm name dropping, one of my great friends, really my brother, is Matthew Lillard. And he was a regular on the show, and he tried to get me on the first season, and there just wasn't an opportunity for it. And then he really pushed for me on the second season, and luckily Elwood Reed, who was the showrunner, is a big dude. He's like 6'6", and he and I met, and he's from Ohio, and I'm from Indiana, and he's a big sci-fi fantasy fan and reader and crime novels, and we really hit it off in music, and we have a lot of shared passions. And so I was able to get that role, and that was the sort of the first time I've been the dick in the suit, which is that's a future for me on screen, I think, as sort of the jerky older dude who suppresses the truth.
Right, and it's just, yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, and now you know I'm friendly with Alejandro Patino, who was on that show. And, yeah, he was like the same thing when it was at the end of the second season. A bunch of us were tweeting, like, how the hell could you cancel this show? Now your character, what's it, was that, okay, now I want to talk about the death. Now, how many times have you been killed on screen? And what's the worst? What's the worst? Because you got your ass blown apart in that one house scene.
Yes, on the bridge I get shot to hell. And that was like 4 days laying in a sticky pool of blood, which is miserable. It was hot. It's like out in the desert of California. It was hot and sticky and awful, but super fun scene to play. And some great stunt work in that scene. If people go back and watch, there's like a woman who falls down the stairs, and the guy gets shot off his feet, and there's so that's always really cool. I love what stunt people do. I think that's a really underrated aspect of filmmaking. I have died, I don't know how many times, man. I would say in 75% of the projects I've worked on, I've died. Probably the coolest one is in a film called U-Turn, which is an Oliver Stone film, where I'm robbing a grocery, and as I'm getting away with a giant bag of money, the lady behind the grocery counter shoots me with a shotgun. And so that was like a big squib on my chest and back, and I remember the gentleman who was the explosive effects guy he comes up to me and he's like, all right, now, I don't know if you've ever worn one of these, but this is a really big version. It's not going to hurt you too much, but it's going to be fine. And he was missing 2 fingers, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? So that was fun.
And now, was that one take?
Yes, that was one take. I think 3 cameras, and it's really overcranked and slow motion, and so that's a great death. That's my favorite of mine.
Now, how did you become good friends with Matthew Lillard? Were you guys auditioning around? Did you meet each other when you first moved out here, or because you guys both been working for a long time?
No, interestingly enough, we didn't meet until 2003 when we were both lucky enough to go and make a film in New Zealand called Without a Paddle, and we hit it off, and we both found out that we played Dungeons and Dragons, and the rest of the cast was making fun of us. Like Dax Shepard is in that movie, and he would be like, "Oh, Dungeons and Dragons, I'm a wizard. I cast my spell on you." And they were merciless. He and Ethan Suplee especially were merciless against Lillard and I. And so Matthew was like, "You should come join my Dungeons and Dragons game." And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to. And I don't think he really believed me. And he likes to tell this story where he says, we got lucky enough to be invited to the premiere of The Return of the King, the third Lord of the Rings film. And it was this massive citywide celebration where they had a parade, and we walked in behind the president of New Zealand, and dragons and Nazgul on the building rooftops. And the end of the movie is coming, and I'm sitting next to Lillard, and he looks over, and there's literally tears streaming down my face. Tolkien's such a huge part of my life. And he knew at that moment that I was actually going to be welcome at the D&D table, and that's how we became friends.
See, I know it's funny because you always hear about the celebrity poker tournaments, but now there's a whole celebrity D&D table.
Yes, absolutely. It's crazy how big it's gotten. But he and I we've been playing with the same group since 2003, so 14 years.
Now, are they all Hollywood people?
No, well, they are all. Most of them are writers, actually. And funny enough, I have multiple campaigns, multiple games of Dungeons and Dragons going, but we play with 4 of the writers from The Bridge. We suckered them into it, and that's really fun. We just did that last weekend, and Lillard Skyped in from Atlanta. But the group that is the old school group are friends of his from New York, mostly writers. Yeah.
So now you're also on Bosch.
Yes.
And that's a really good show. That's one of those shows, it's it's very. Luckily, we have Amazon Prime and Netflix, and they give different shows. But the hard thing is, like, a lot of times Amazon Prime, not a ton of people have it, so people are missing really quality shows. Like I had Sean Ryan, the creator of The Shield, on, and he had done a show. He helped executive produce called Mad Dogs. It was an Amazon, great show. But the thing about Amazon is a lot of people they get confused. Like someone said, "Well, why would I want Amazon Prime?" I'm like, "Well, it's like Netflix. It's not that expensive, and you get shipping for free with other stuff, so it's a good deal." So how did Bosch come about? And it's like, and plus working with Titus Welliver, he works all the time too. It must be cool.
Oh man, yeah. Well, I'll take those in order. First of all, Amazon Prime is amazing. It's if you like Netflix, you'll love Amazon Prime. That's my plug for them for the day. Absolutely fantastic. And you're right about the free shipping. That makes a giant difference. And their library is super extensive. And if you've binged everything on Netflix or HBO, Amazon Prime is your next baby. And Bosch is amazing. It's a great show. Michael Connelly, who wrote the novels that the show is based on, is on set all the time and really present and keeping the tone as close to his vision as can be. It's run by a guy called Eric Overmyer, who did a great show on HBO called Treme about New Orleans. And Titus Welliver's an amazing guy. He is a super interesting, fantastic actor, but he and I sat in that courtroom quoting Apocalypse Now, and he can quote the whole movie verbatim, backwards and forwards, every character, every line. It's kind of bananas, and there's a lot of films like that he's capable of, and he's an amazing mimic and impersonator, and so just really interesting. I mean, that's one of the great things about working in shows business is you get to meet these people that are beyond what you see on screen. Most of the people in the business are super creative and super interesting. And what you get on screen is a tiny little fraction. So I've been really lucky and grateful to see behind the curtain a little.
See, I always say it too, because with my guests, and then you learn so much about them. I mean, like, there's so many actors that play musical instruments. It's just right. Weird. Like, you sit there and it's just, and then it's just amazing that there are different sides. And now you've been, through your career, you've done a lot of different things. Now, you got to play a dick, which, you like, and you got to play, a guy got to make out with girls, and, you had the fun Parker Lewis and you had ER. But now, I know you did some of Robot Chicken. Now, how did you get into the voice work? And that's something you always wanted to do. Like, were you sitting there going, I got to get into that stuff because it just looks fun?
Man, that's the most fun. The same story as Lillard, really. I'd known Seth Green just through buying toys and comic books. In fact, I met Seth Green at the audition for Austin Powers, so that's how long he and I have crossed paths. And then he was in Without a Paddle as well, and we really bonded even more than we already had been. And he showed me the original concept for what became Robot Chicken while we were there in New Zealand, and it was super fun. And he was like, if we make this into a show, you can do voices. And I was like, I would love to, absolutely. And then again, he kept his promise, and I wound up getting to do a lot of fun voices on that show. And then as it became more successful, he got more brave and approached George Lucas, and we got the blessing of George Lucas to do these Star Wars specials, and that was a dream come true for everybody involved on that show. I sat next to Mark Hamill while we did the commentary on our episode, and I'm like, that's another one of those moments where I'm like, from Indiana to sitting next to Luke Skywalker, and just in awe of that. And because of that, I've gotten to really do a lot of fun voiceover stuff. I've got a bunch of voices on World of Warcraft video game. A couple other, I got to do the overdubs for this Korean cartoon, which is really fun. And we had this secret project called Star Wars Detours, which you can still find the trailer and clips of on YouTube. Totally worth looking up, but it was an irreverent look at the Star Wars universe from the minds of Seth Green and Matthew Senreich. And that's super fun. I think we did 40 episodes.
That must be great.
Oh man, so fun! And then when Disney bought Lucas, they didn't bury the show, but it may see the light of day at some point. But that wasn't the kind of image that they wanted to. They didn't want an irreverent look at Star Wars while they were revamping the universe, which I understood.
Now, what's the movie you're in with Dumont?
Yeah, so James Dumont, I think he and I are in a few movies together, but the one that sort of drew you and I together is a film called Little Boy that we made in Mexico about 4 years ago, and is a really fantastic story. I think it's the best script I ever read before filming, and it turned out really great. And it was sort of marketed as a faith-based movie, and it's not that at all. It's interesting that that's what happened to it. So I highly recommend. It's on Netflix. I think it's probably on Amazon Prime as well. But Little Boy, it's a story of a boy whose father goes off to World War II, and the boy believes that he can do magic, and he does all these, really tries to get his father to come back from the war. And a lot of interesting things happen that make it seem like he's really doing magic. And it's a really smart script, a really great cast. Emily Watson is in that, and that, talk about a treat to play a scene with another legend in my mind, at any rate. Really great, and James has a great character in that. And James Dumont is a hustler, man. He's in so many great movies, and he just really knows how to get those jobs and take advantage and really maximize and be great when he does get them. So hats off to him for sure.
Yeah, I gotta watch. I always see him. It's so funny, and it's just because now he lives in New Orleans, and so it's
I have so much envy. I love New Orleans so much.
Now you're also in Jessica Darling's It List.
Yeah, that's coming up. I'm going to get to see that in the next month or so.
That's funny because Jane Sibbett was on last week, and Eric Lutz was on 3 weeks ago.
Oh, nice. That's fun. Yeah, that's a really fun little project too. Actually, really interested to see what happens with that. Smart show. All female filmmakers, producers, and director, which I thought was great. And it's one of those things where I shot all of my stuff in like 3 days, and just having fun. And those are the great projects for me, where you show up, do the work, and the director's like, okay, I've got what I need, now go have fun.
Now, what else do you have coming up? Is it because you always work? As I said, there's so many people. You guys always work, and you look at the resume and you go, geez, there's no holes. Whenever I sit there, I go, you have 92 IMDb credits, and they're real credits. They're not like people putting background stuff or a YouTube video. But so what's up next for you?
What's up? Yeah, real credits. I appreciate you glossing over the holes in my Swiss cheese career.
No, you didn't have any.
There's some holes.
We just didn't hit some of the shows because I had to get the Bosch and Bridge and the classic ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. So, end of the month, there's a film coming out on video that was in theaters for a very brief time in January called The Finest Hours, which is about a true story about a Coast Guard rescue that happened in the 50s. And I hope people will pick it up on video because it's a really great film and the biggest production by far that I've ever worked on. And that stars Chris Pine and Casey Affleck, and some of Casey Affleck's best work. Really great in that piece. And then there's a show on Cinemax called Outcast. That's sort of a supernatural demons take over a small town from the same creator of The Walking Dead. That's on Cinemax starting in May. And then I just finished a film that James is in as well, James Dumont, called Heart Baby. And that's a true story about a prisoner who was such a good boxer that he was offered freedom if he would join the 1984 Olympic boxing team. And he turns it down for a reason that nobody will suspect. And that's, again, one of the finest scripts I've read and one of the best filming experiences I've had. Heart Baby, sometime next year. Probably will do festivals and all that. Hopefully just straight into the theaters. But that's a really special project that I really hope people get to see.
Now, do you think as you're getting older, and you can play, as you said, you can play across the board. You said you got to be a dick. The Tree show, you played a nice guy. Do you think that you're getting better scripts because people know you have the chops and you have the versatility to play different roles. I mean, there's some people who are just one-hit wonders. I mean, you know, that's like in any business. But do you think that happens? Because it seems like a lot of the projects you've recently done, whether it be The Bridge, The Boss, the 2 movies, you know, 3 movies you talked about, were just great projects. Do you think you're getting, it's like a karmic thing karma coming to you, just that you're getting these great scripts?
I'd like to think it's sort of like, for me, I just kind of go after everything, and I never really know what's going to stick. My agents are pretty good about not sticking me in the box of the big guy role. So it's strange, you know. I never know what's going to come next. We don't really get to pick most of us actors. So I'm always just looking for something that I like the material, or the people involved, or the location of the shooting. To be honest with you, and I just hope I get to keep doing it. You know, I'm pretty happy on set. It doesn't get a whole lot better than that.
Few minutes left. What was your favorite 2 locations to shoot?
Oh man, I mean, New Zealand and New Orleans, no question. I love New Orleans so much. That is probably the greatest city on earth. Very unique. There's nowhere like that. Definitely the greatest city in America. New Orleans. Who dat? And then New Zealand is just what you see in the Lord of the Rings films. I mean, it is a different place, and it is a really great people there, great food, beautiful nature, amazing topography. They have a law there that you can't build anything with within 150 yards of the beachfront. So every beachfront is like undeveloped and really clean and beautiful, and the rivers. So there's a scene in Without a Paddle where Ethan Suplee and I are fishing with dynamite in this river, and we're standing up in a boat, and the boat's anchored, you know, because it's film magic. And I'm looking down into this river, and the water is so clean that it's almost not there. Like, we're floating about 5 feet above these rocks, this rocky bottom. I just remember thinking, there is nowhere in the continental U.S. where the water is this clean. There's nothing like this here.
And to think you get paid for that.
Amazing.
I mean, that's always great. Like, you know, when you guys get to go to these great places, it's such a, you know, the perks of the job.
Oh my gosh, that's the perk of the job for me, honestly. You know, I've gotten to travel quite a bit for my work, and I couldn't be more grateful for that aspect. Now, are you a big social media guy? I guess I am. Yeah, I try to. I don't know.
Are you on the Twitter? Are you on the Twitter?
Yeah. What's that?
Are you on the Twitter?
I'm on the Twitter at Abraham Benrubi. I'm on the Instagram, which is probably my favorite of the platforms. And that one I'm at Jambon Deluxe, which is when I was a DJ at the punk rock bar, I was DJ Fancy Ham.
Okay, I was sitting there, I didn't know what it was. I was like, what the hell?
Yeah, Jambon is French for ham.
Well, yeah, I want to thank you for coming on. This was fun. Pleasure. And I'm glad we could, as I said, you know, I used to record in the studio, and then what happened was the studio closed, so now I Skype, so it's not the same as face-to-face meeting people, so I don't get to take a nice picture of them anymore, but it's always good to have someone come on. So people, go check him out on Twitter. Go to his IMDb page. You know, you gotta go to these people, the guests of mine, because they have such amazing careers, and you IMDb it, and you just see what a body of work and what talents they are. So check them out at Abraham Benrubi at Twitter. I'm at Cooper Talk. Please go to at Cooper Talk on Twitter. Also, CooperTalk.net is my website, over 510 episodes. You can email me, Cooper at CooperTalk.net. My Instagram is CooperTalk1, as is my Words with Friends. It's CooperTalk1, so you can check that out. I think it's CooperTalk1, my Words with Friends. Send me a message for that. And also, don't forget, I'm doing comedy June 16th if you're in the Burbank area. I think it's June 14th. I'm sorry. It's a Tuesday night at Flappers. It's a $2 Bucky Yuck night. So come on out to that. And please go to my other website, stopthesalt.com. Remember when I had that health problem a few years ago? That's going to be 4 years coming up. That, you know, I was in the hospital with a heart problem. I changed my diet. I wrote a cookbook. It's called Stop the Salt. It's got no pictures because that intimidates you guys. It's got no major ingredients. I mean, there's ingredients, but no list of major spices. Like, I have cumin, but a lot of people don't have cumin in their house. And it's 120 easy recipes. So what you got to do is look it up, buy it from me there. You can go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble. But if you buy it from me, I make more money, and I will even sign it for you. All right, Steve Cooper. Thank you very much. So go do that. Check out Abraham Benrubi's work on on IMDb. Follow him on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter at Cooper Talk. Email me, Cooper@CooperTalk.net. I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guest. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and you guys have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.
Be good to each